Canada just made America's aluminum problem much harder to solve. US manufacturers depend on Canadian supply to keep production moving, but replacing it could take far more than expected. The deal that promised relief has now fallen apart, leaving American businesses facing a costly problem. American manufacturers just got hit with an aluminum bill they cannot escape. The extra costs US buyers pay to get aluminum delivered, the Midwest premium rocketed to 90.30 cents per pound in December 2025, nearly 4 times what it was a year earlier. Canada supplies about 68% of America's aluminum imports, and the math shows the United States simply cannot replace it. Then it collapsed. The US Midwest aluminum premium is the extra amount buyers pay above the global aluminum price to get metal physically delivered into the American market. That premium reached 90.30 cents per pound in December 2025, almost 4 times its level a year earlier, according to S&P Global. That is an extraordinary jump. The premium sits on top of the base global price, so American manufacturers are paying far more than buyers anywhere else in the world just to get the aluminum into their factories. A near quadrupling in a single year is not normal market movement. It is the signature of a supply chain under severe strain. For a brief moment this month, it looked like relief was coming. On August 20th, the September Midwest premium fell 8.2% to 95 cents per pound, while October and November contracts dropped more than 12%. The reason for the decline was hope reports suggested the United States could reduce its tariffs on some Canadian steel and aluminum from 50% down to 25%. The market moved immediately on the expectation that cheaper Canadian aluminum would soon flow more freely into the United States. Traders priced in the relief before any deal was even signed, and premiums began falling in anticipation. Then the deal failed. On August 21st, the trade negotiations between the United States and Canada collapsed, and the 50% tariffs went ahead on the affected Canadian imports. Prime Minister Mark Carney suspended the talks and promised retaliation, announcing that Canada would match the American tariffs dollar for dollar. The hopeful reduction from 50% to 25% never materialized. The premium relief that markets had priced in evaporated the moment the talks broke down. Instead of cheaper aluminum, American manufacturers were left facing the full 50% tariff and a deepening trade war with their largest supplier. The bigger problem, the one that makes this so difficult for Washington, is that the United States cannot simply replace Canada overnight. Morgan Stanley estimates that during the first half of 2026, the United States imported about 1.68 million tons of aluminum, while Canada supplied about 1.16 million tons. That means Canada provided roughly 68% of America's aluminum import needs. More than 2/3 of every imported ton came from a single country. That level of concentration is not something that can be redirected or replaced through policy alone. It reflects decades of integrated supply relationships built around Canadian metal. The most striking part of the math is what it reveals about the limits of any alternative. Even if Canada redirected essentially all of its aluminum production toward the United States, it would still fall short of total American import requirements. Read that again. Canada is already America's dominant supplier, and even its entire output would not cover everything the United States needs to import. That single fact demolishes the idea that the tariffs can quickly force a shift to domestic or alternative supply. If the largest supplier cannot meet demand even at full capacity, there is no easy path to replacing that supplier at all. And if you want the real story behind how Canada is still holding its ground through tariffs, wars, and hard times, hit join below to join the membership for exclusive documentaries you won't see anywhere else about Canada's progress and rise through uncertainty. Why can't America just make its own aluminum? Because aluminum smelting requires enormous amounts of cheap, continuous electricity, and the United States lacks both the smelting capacity and the low-cost power that make Canadian aluminum competitive. Canada's smelters, particularly in Quebec, run on abundant hydroelectric power, producing metal at a cost American producers cannot match. Building new domestic smelting capacity would take years and billions of dollars, and it would still face the fundamental problem of expensive American electricity. The tariffs raise the price of Canadian aluminum, but they create no domestic alternative to replace it. This is what transforms the aluminum premium from a commodity market statistic into an industrial sector crisis. Higher aluminum costs flow directly into manufacturers of cars, appliances, packaging, and beverage cans. Aluminum is a foundational material across American industry, and when its delivered cost nearly quadruples, that increases ripples through every product built with it. Automakers pay more to produce vehicles. Appliance makers pay more for their materials. Beverage companies pay more for cans. Eventually, those higher costs reach consumers through higher prices on cars, refrigerators, canned goods, and countless other products. The premium is not contained in the metals market. It spreads across the entire economy. The industries most exposed are the ones that consume the most aluminum. The automotive sector uses enormous quantities of the metal, particularly as manufacturers shift toward lightweight aluminum bodies and components to improve fuel efficiency. The packaging and beverage can industries depend on aluminum as their primary material. Construction, aerospace, and appliance manufacturing all rely on steady, affordable aluminum supply. For each of these sectors, the near quadrupling of the Midwest premium represents a direct hit to production costs, one they must either absorb, passing the pain to their margins, or pass along to customers through higher prices. The failed deal makes the outlook worse rather than better. Had the tariff dropped from 50% to 25%, American manufacturers would have gained meaningful relief on the cost of Canadian aluminum. Instead, the full 50% tariff remains, and Canada is now retaliating. The premium, which had begun falling in anticipation of a deal, now faces upward pressure again as the reality of the continued tariffs sets in. American industry is left paying the elevated premium with no near-term prospect of relief, while the trade war between the two countries escalates further. The retaliation adds another dimension of uncertainty. With Carney committing Canada to dollar-for-dollar countermeasures beginning September 8th, the conflict is expanding rather than resolving. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has separately threatened to cut off electricity and critical minerals, and Trump has threatened new 50% tariffs on Canadian autos and steel starting in 2027. Each escalation deepens the disruption to the integrated North American supply chain that American aluminum consumers depend on. The longer the conflict continues, the more entrenched the elevated premiums become, and the harder it is for American manufacturers to plan around their aluminum costs. The strategic contradiction at the heart of this is stark. Washington wants to reduce American dependence on foreign metal, and the tariffs are meant to push production back home. But the numbers show just how difficult it is to replace Canada's supply quickly or at all. Canada provides 68% of American aluminum imports, and even its entire production could not cover total US import needs. The tariff strategy assumes replaceability that the data simply does not support. You cannot tariff your way out of a dependency when the supplier you are taxing is one you cannot do without. That is what makes this more than a question of price. The real issue is no longer simply how expensive aluminum has become. It is whether the United States can afford to lose its biggest foreign aluminum supplier while keeping American industry supplied. The Midwest premium at 90.30 cents per pound, nearly 4 times its year-ago level, is the market's answer to that question. American manufacturers depend on Canadian aluminum they cannot replace. The deal that would have eased the tariffs collapsed, and Canada is now retaliating.